We're gonna change the seals in these cylinders. When we put this lift up, the one side was leaking and it was coming out of this little plug up here, and I thought, oh, I'll just plug the plug, but that's not what the plug's, it's supposed to have air coming out of there, not hydraulic fluid. So what the problem is there's a U-cup seal on the piston on the bottom of this rod, and it was leaking on that one. This one wasn't leaking, but I'm gonna go ahead and rebuild it while I've got it torn apart, just because they're original and I don't have any idea how old this is. So in order to get the cylinder out, you disconnect the hydraulic line down there at the bottom, and then take the fitting that hooks to the hose out of this side, and then on the back you've got the hose that comes down from your pump and it goes into this fitting that goes through the back. Well, with these fittings in there, the cylinder won't come out. So you remove those two fittings, and then the cylinder, well, you can take this chain roller off the top, just makes things a little lighter, set it up that way. And I did pick this carriage up with the cherry picker just to get it out of the way. It's sitting on the lock. The cherry picker's not holding it. I wouldn't work on this with the cherry picker holding it. It's sitting on the actual lock for the lift. So then you just take your cylinder and it picks up right out of there. And take this over to the bench and we'll take it apart. Okay, on this cylinder, the caps don't thread in. There's this retaining ring that is down inside here. You can see the groove where you get it out, and that's actually the end of the retaining ring. What you have to do is, I'm just using a drill bit in the end of the cap there, and it just fits in there nice and snug, and that's what's gonna allow me to rotate the cap. And as you can see, that ring is moving with it. So we're gonna take our pick, put it under the end of that ring, and rotate this until we get that ring started out of there. So now it's started up out of that groove. You just keep rotating it, and your retaining ring, which is probably not what it's called, but that's what I'm gonna call it, will come right out. You can see it's just got a little bit of a hook bent on the end, and that will allow it to go into that hole when you get ready to put it back together. This hooked piece just fits in that hole, and you'll pull it in when you put it back together. I'm gonna get this off and get the ram out of here. Just gonna use a couple of rags to catch whatever oil comes out of this, because there's gonna be some oil left in it. You just grab the rod, and you wanna keep it kind of straight because there's not a lot of clearance in there. And it comes straight out. There was no oil in this one. You're gonna wanna protect this from getting scratched. You don't want to scratch this shaft at all. So I'm just setting it on a towel here on the bench. And then on the end of the rod, there's this piston assembly. And you could change, this is the U-cup seal. This is the one that actually holds the pressure, and this is called a wear band, according to my hydraulic shop. And you could change this without taking it off, but I found it was easier to change it if I took it off there. And there's also an O-ring on the shaft between the piston and the shaft itself, so we're gonna take it all apart. This one has an 1.5 inch nut on the bottom. Put the impact on there, hold this from turning. It'll come right off, and then the piston comes off. You can see there's an O-ring in there. This one was not in very good shape. Take these over to the parts washer and just clean them up real quick. We have 4 parts we're gonna change. First thing we're gonna change is this O-ring that goes on the end of the shaft down here. And I already did the other cylinder, just to make sure that I could figure out how to put it back together before I started making a video on it. That by no means makes me qualified to do this, but it's pretty easy. And as long as you get it put back together, which you want to make sure when you put an O-ring on like that, which it's probably not super critical in this application, but you want to make sure that you don't get a twist in it, because it makes a thin spot and it won't seal as good or at all. And then on the U-cup seal, if this is anything like the old one, as soon as I start to try to pull it out, it's just going to break. Might be in a little better shape than the other one was. Oh yeah, that's what the other one did. It just broke. And then the wear band Just comes off like that. And I had a hard time getting the new U-cup seal on the other one. What I ended up doing was putting this actually lightly in the vise with the rag on it and using the vise to hold it. And you just want to make sure you get your cup goes down so that when this is bolted on, the cup is facing down so the pressure builds on the bottom and pushes the rod out. Now I'm not using the vise to do anything but hold that seal from popping back out of there on the bottom. And then I had a really hard time getting the other one on too. These I believe are reinforced cup seals because they're solid, and I don't believe the original ones were. I went to a hydraulic shop and they gave me these seals. They said they'd work, so I'm going to take their word for it. Just kind of rotate the screwdriver. What I'm trying not to do is get that seal cut on the edge because I don't want to mess up the surface where it seals against that piston. And then just finish it off. And then I'm just gonna check and make sure that I didn't do any damage to that lip. And it looks pretty good. So then we put our wear band on there, and our O-ring's already changed, so we'll just take a little hydraulic oil. Just put a little on there to lubricate it so it'll go back together nice and easy. Push the piston right up there and we'll tighten this nut. There's a torque spec for this, I'm sure. It's probably more than that, but that socket doesn't interface with that nut very well, and I don't have one that fits down in there, so I don't want to destroy it. So I don't think there's a lot of vibration going on when this is going up and down, so I think it'll be all right. The last thing we have to change is this seal. It's like a wiper seal or a gland. That one's in really good shape. Wiper seal or a gland seal. This one's going to come out in little bitty pieces. Okay. Once you get the edge broke, it kind of come out a lot easier. And then just make sure you get all the old seal out of there and the junk and stuff. This just keeps dirt and stuff from getting down in your cylinder. The new one has a step on it, and again, the guys at the hydraulic shop matched this up and got me the right one. If you're having trouble getting that in there, take it back out, make sure you didn't accidentally leave a piece of the old seal behind like I did. So now that's done. Now, probably would be a good idea to clean out the inside of this bore somehow. I don't have any way to do that. This was not leaking before. The seal wasn't all trashed and destroyed. I've looked down inside of it. It looks okay. I'm gonna put it back together. But if you want a rebuilt cylinder, you need to figure out a way to probably clean up the inside of that bore. And at that point, you're probably better off to take it to a hydraulic shop and just let them professionally rebuild this. This is a very DIY, get it done at home kind of deal, not an actual rebuild. We're gonna lube our seal up really good. And then I've already wiped out the top of that cylinder and checked to make sure that there weren't any burrs or any bad spots. We're just gonna put the rod back down in here. You wanna keep this as straight as you possibly can. And then what I found to get past the first lip, if I just kind of rotate it and work it around, it goes past the first one, no problem. Well, then it gets caught right in here on that lip. So what I did on the other one to get it in there was I pulled it out just a tiny bit like that, and then took a feeler gauge and just kind of put it in there to get that lip past that lip there, and then did the same thing again. If you just keep working it, eventually you can get it past. what you're fighting is that seal is out in that groove. And like I said, it's got a good taper on the bottom, so it shouldn't mess the seal up, and it looks like it's good there. So just keep working at it, and eventually it'll go down. And then once you work it enough, it'll go past that seal and then it'll go straight down. And again, this is trying to bind up because it's not holding it straight. So I got it about that far, just enough so it won't fall over. We're just protecting that shaft. We don't want to scratch it or mar it up or anything. So then you take your, I think they call this a cap, and you pre-lube it. Probably should have cleaned a little more of that paint off there. In fact, I'm gonna do that real quick. So now we got all that paint off of there, so this will slide over nice and easy. And it just slides right down and into place. Now I'm gonna pick this back up and clamp it in the vise. And anytime I'm putting this in the vise, I'm not putting very much pressure on it, just enough to hold it. I think you'd have to put a lot of pressure on it to bend that cylinder, but I don't want to take a chance. So just enough to keep it in there so it doesn't fall out, okay? Then you rotate this around until you find that hole where this hook fits into. And I'm gonna put this together so I'm turning it to the right, like I'm tightening a nut. I don't know if it matters, but that seems like the right way or the easy way to remember which way it goes in and out. So then you just put the hook down in there, and then it'll grab a hold of it. Maybe. So I did this on the other one too. I'm just gonna bend a little bit more of an hook on the end of this. It just it wants to pull out of that slot instead of being pulled all the way through. So I'm just gonna bend it more like that. And then as you can see, it just pulls that retainer right down inside there like that. And I just left just a little bit of it sticking out so I know which way to turn it if I have to take it back apart some other time. Then you just put the cylinder back in the lift the way you took it out, and it should be good. All right, we got it all put back together and got it all down. And now it's time to see if it'll go back up. Since I don't really have any other way to test it if it's leaking or not, we're just gonna let it sit here and make sure it's not locked. We'll just give it a 5-minute test to see if it bleeds down. That's the best way I can think of to test it. It's still in the same place, so I would say it's good. Never ever rely on the hydraulics to hold the car up if you're going to be working under it. Always put it on the stops. I just did this test to see if it would bleed down because before, when it was leaking, it was bleeding down bad and fast. So just wanted to, I just tested this to see if the hydraulics were going to hold, not to see if it would. I'm never going to be using this lift with just the hydraulics holding the car. Anyway, I hope you learned something. It's really not that hard. I'm sure they're all different, but if you just take your time, be careful, you take it apart, go to your local hydraulic shop, they can get you the parts you need to put it back together. And as long as you check everything and make sure everything's in good shape, if it was working just leaking, it should work after you're done. See you soon.